Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're diving into an incredible story of survival against all odds. It's about how a people stripped of literally everything they knew didn't just endure, they completely reinvented themselves in the process. It's a huge question, one that pops up again and again throughout history. It's really the heart of what we're exploring today. When your land, your capital city, and your most sacred places are all gone, what's left? How do you even begin to hold a people together? Well, the answer is a true masterclass in resilience. So, to really get the sheer shock of this exile, we first need to paint a picture of the world that was lost. Let's take a quick look at what life was like before everything came crashing down. For centuries, the identity of the people of Judah was basically built on three solid pillars: a specific piece of land they called home, a political and cultural capital in Jerusalem, and right at the heart of it all, the temple. And this wasn't just a building, it was the absolute center of their entire religious universe. And then the Babylonian Empire shows up, and in less than 20 years, they just completely tear it all down. This timeline shows you just how fast and brutal it was. First, a siege. Then, they deport the elites, the leaders, and then comes the final devastating blow in 586 BCE. Jerusalem is sacked, the sacred temple is utterly destroyed, and the mass deportations begin. It was all over, just like that. So what happens next? Just try to imagine it. You're forcibly marched hundreds of miles away from your home, deep into a foreign land, the land of the very people who just conquered you. This was the profound shock and the unbelievable challenge of exile. Yeah, this slide just lays it out so clearly. It was a complete 180. 1 minute, you're a sovereign kingdom. The next, you're just another province in someone else's empire. You go from having this one single holy place to worship to nothing. Your whole identity, which was so wrapped up in a physical place, was suddenly in a massive crisis. And this moment, this is where we get a word we still use all the time: diaspora. It actually comes from a Greek word that means to scatter, and it perfectly describes what happened here: the scattering of a people from their homeland. This event really became the blueprint for that idea. And this leads us to the absolute million-dollar question, right? When you are staring cultural extinction in the face, what do? Do you just give up? Let your culture get absorbed and just fade away? Or do you figure out a whole new way to be who you are? And folks, this is where the story takes a turn that is just mind-blowing. Because the people of Judah didn't just get lucky. They engineered one of the most brilliant cultural turnarounds in all of history. They literally created a blueprint for resilience. This idea right here, it's just so powerful. With their physical temple completely gone, just a pile of rubble, they made this radical change in direction. They started building a totally new kind of temple, a temple that no army could ever burn down, that no empire could ever demolish. It was a temple built not of stone, but of stories, laws, and secret words. And you gotta understand, this wasn't an accident. This wasn't just luck. It was a strategy, a conscious three-step plan for survival. Let's break down exactly how they pulled it off. Okay, step one, write it all down. All those oral traditions, their histories, their laws, prophecies, everything was gathered, it was organized, and it was written down, eventually forming the core of the Hebrew Bible. And what this did was create a portable identity. Suddenly your culture, your homeland, you could carry it with you, right there in a scroll. Step two, the temple was gone, so they needed a new way to be a community. And this is where a brand new idea is born: the synagogue. It wasn't a replacement for the temple, not exactly. It was a totally new kind of space, a local hub for prayer, for study, and just for being together. And because of this, leadership changed too. It wasn't about kings and priests anymore. It was about scholars and teachers, the people who knew the texts. And this right here, this is the real game changer, the most revolutionary shift of all. They went from a faith that was tied to one single physical place, the temple in Jerusalem, to a faith that was centered on a text. Now, their faith could be practiced, studied, and lived anywhere in the world. And get this, they had to keep this up for around 70 years. That's not just a few years, that's 2, maybe 3 generations of people being born and living their entire lives in exile. This wasn't some short-term crisis, it was a long-term reality, and it needed a solution that would last. So when you boil it all down, what are the big lessons here? Well, first, Sometimes the worst thing that can possibly happen ends up being the spark for the most brilliant new ideas. Second, that your culture doesn't have to be stuck to a map. It can actually become portable. And finally, that a strong community, one that can adapt, is probably the best survival tool there is. And that kind of leaves us with one last big question to think about. In our own world, which is always changing, always in flux, what can this ancient story about turning absolute loss into timeless strength? What can it teach us about how to be resilient today?